If you're a fan of Bleach, please hit that subscribe button. Let's support Bleach as a team until the anime returns in 2021. Because if you support me, I'll keep supporting Bleach by making plenty of content in the future. The Vizards in Bleach are some of the most underappreciated characters in the entire series. A group of shinigami exiled from the Soul Society and manipulated by Aizen to the point where their entire goal in life revolved around defeating him, and were cast away into the real world where they would find a way to survive, master their inner hollows, and become the mentors of Ichigo to help him learn to use his hollowfication. And they were, without a doubt, some of the most aesthetic characters in the series when it comes to their fashion and fighting styles. In today's video, I'm going to do my best to rank them all as accurately as possible, as surprisingly there isn't a lot of videos on these guys. So if you want more videos like these, a simple subscribe and a like on the video is all I ask. So let's get into it. Hiyori, the 100-year-old loli, is quite impressive as she pushed Shikai Ichigo to the point where White took over just to shut her bitch ass up, while Ichigo was holding back the entire time as he was scared of White taking over. She landed multiple heavy blows on Haribel and seems to have the respect of Toshido to some extent, though you can argue a lot of her highlights were purely because she wasn't in a one-on-one battle and had openings presented to her by virtue of her teammates, though she surprisingly is quite versed at Hakata, mixing a lot of her hand-to-hand combat into her actual sword fighting. I'd say one of her best feats was unironically being able to somewhat analyze what Kisuke Urahara did when he tried to not embarrass her in their funny little scuffle in the anime. Not entirely a real feat by any means, but it shows that although she is one of the hothead type characters in the series, she has a keen eye in combat. Although her base form isn't anything too crazy in terms of strength, when hollowified, she gains an amp that is easily above Bankai, and this allows her to compete with characters that would normally be able to one-shot her in battle, on top of also being able to use her Shikai, which then gives her another increase in strength on top of this. Hiyori is only able to hollowify for around 5 minutes, but also has a cool ability of being able to fire a triple Zero. This doesn't mean that it's insanely stronger or anything to the point where it's getting like a 10 times increase in attack potency like a Gronere Zero or a Black Zero, but it obviously does increase the firepower quite a bit. Also, her favorite insult is actually calling people baldy even if they aren't bald, and it states this in one of the Bleach data books. To all of the Hiyori fans out there, I would put her higher on the list, but yeah, this kind of happens. It also doesn't help that she is incredibly impulsive and makes a lot of errors in combat, which doesn't complement her lack of power compared to the rest, on top of her ability to not really work in a team setting. Coming in at number 2 is definitely Lisa Yadomaru, who is also one of the most underrated waifus in the series, and way too many people sleep on her. In fact, it's noted in the Bleach data book Masked that she, and I quote, is a strong-minded and dirty-minded Vizard, a strange girl whose hobby is reading pornographic magazines and claims to read 2 magazines a day. She occasionally lends them to love at times, and she took the lead while fighting Hollow Ichigo during the hollowfication training. I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to talk about this stuff in a video or I'll get demonetized. Lisa, the former lieutenant of Shunsui, is surprisingly stronger than people think, but sadly not strong enough to be further on the list. She fought quite well against Haribel with Toshido and Hiyori, being able to blitz Haribel, who was in her release state, and attacking Toshiro from behind. Although her Shikai is pretty cool and reminds me of Ikaku's, she can also use it like an axe, but sadly it doesn't really seem to have any special ability to it, other than being very good for physical combat, which also gets an amp from her hollowfication. It's interesting to note that against Haribel, she wasn't fast going head-on against her, even in her base form, but against a deformed version of Ichigo's Hollow, she actually believed that she might die. In the War Arc of Bleach, you do get to see her a few times, but she doesn't really do anything other than throw a few cool attacks at the Miracle, which doesn't really do much, just like all the other Vizards that attacked him, because, you know, it's the Miracle. Funnily enough though, she knew Shunsui was pretending to be dead during his battle with Stark, which always makes me laugh. Coming in third on this list is Shido Cunha, another very underrated waifu in the series of Bleach, who actually attained hollowfication without any training for it and can sustain it for up to 15 hours, which is insane. Shido usually fights predominantly with Hakata techniques, as we have never actually seen her use a Zanpakuto, and was able to kill the Hula, a hollow which spits out Menos Grande like nut butter and is obviously much stronger than a Menos Grande. Well, she kills it with a single kick. I would put Shido Mashido higher on this list, but her best feats are defeating a Hollow who is above a Menos Grande, which doesn't say a whole lot compared to the rest of the cast of characters in Bleach at this point in the story, especially compared to the other Vizards, but she does use base Wonder Weiss as a sparring dummy for a while until her mask breaks and Kensei has to save her. Now I do find her hollowfication quite impressive, as she can use it longer than any of the other Vizards, but that doesn't inherently make it stronger just because she can use it longer. I've actually heard some people argue this before in terms of Mashido being stronger than the others because she can use her hollowfication longer than the others, which is like saying that just because she can use her hollowfication longer than Ichigo, Shinji, or Love, that means that her hollowfication is stronger than theirs, purely because she can use it longer. It's just a really weird argument to make. Also, inflating her combat strength way overboard just based off of her fighting base Wonder Weiss is not really that impressive, considering he is basically and we can't even gauge when he's actually being serious in majority of these fights. Plus, a lot of her attacks don't even seem to damage him that much, whereas Kensei pushed him to go into his release state without even using his hollowfication, but Mashiro, who was able to land multiple heavy blows, didn't. Another thing to add, when Wonder Weiss does connect a punch, it actually one-shots her as her hollowfication breaks, and he loads a second punch, which obviously is going to be much stronger because he sees that he can finish her off, which Kensei casually catches in his base form. Now, some might say the reason it one-shot her is because as the hollow mask breaks, it might like shock your body in some weird way where your spiritual pressure is stagnant for a second. But I don't actually think that's the case, because in Ichigo's second fight with Grimmjow, when his mask actually broke, he took multiple attacks from Grimmjow and it didn't really seem to end the fight in the same way that this did, so I do think that it isn't that crazy to think that Wonder Weiss could actually beat her. It just blows me away a bit because some people really do overhype the hollowfication for 15 hours plus the Wonder Weiss fight, when it's very obvious that Wonder Weiss was, you know, being a A side note which some of you may not know is that she actually helped Shuhei Hisage learn how to use his Bankai in the Bleach novel Can't Fear Your Own World, where she basically forced Shuhei to learn how to use Bankai by fighting him in her hollowfication. An underrated waifu, but this is where Mashido goes on the list. At number 4 on this list is Rose. Now, Rose is a very fascinating character, as most of you may not know this, but Tite Kubo was actually very inspired by music while writing the fights in Bleach, and takes a lot of inspiration from rock style fashion themes, and all around a lot of influence from the culture itself. There was even a quote from Mr. Kubo where he says he would listen to certain music while drawing his fights. Rose's Zanpakuto abilities are honestly really damn cool, but the problem is that he only gets to use them against very bad matchups for him. So he falls under this feeling of, basically, if you're a reader or watcher of Bleach, you probably think he's a jobber, when in actuality, if he just fought different opponents so that he wasn't outclassed in bad matchups, most people would associate him with being very hacks. Rose can use a long-range golden whip in Shikai, using it to tie up opponents, pierce through them, or just attack from afar. His Bankai, Kinshara Butaran, however, has multiple different things that it can do, using sound to hypnotize his opponents. In Bankai, it creates 2 floating gold hands above Rose, almost like he is directing an orchestra, and multiple golden statue beings that become part of his performance. These are called the Dancers of Death, according to Rose, who states that when they hear his Bankai, as long as their heart is deceived, the illusions are realistic enough to cause physical damage and affect the battlefield as if they are real. During this performance, he has multiple sequences that he can activate. Number 1, Sea Drift. He directs the golden statues to surround his enemy and cover them in a whirlpool of fast water, amplified by spiritual pressure. Number 2, Prometheus. He then directs the statues to engulf the enemy in flames. And then the third step, Ein Heldenleben, which gets stopped by Mr. Mask, destroying his eardrums, and then using his Hero's Beam of Light to blitz and one-shot Rose. A pretty sad end, but Rose to me was just frankly a very underutilized character. I feel like Kubo could have did a lot more with him, or at least made him a lot cooler, though if he was stronger, he would be a very dangerous character in the series. Having higher spiritual pressure would make him incredibly potent with his hypnosis. Even at this level, his ability would overwhelm a power fighter like Mashido, who wouldn't have a clue how to deal with it. Coming in 5th on this list is actually Love Ikawa. With his bare hands, not even using his Zanpakuto, he was able to physically rip a Menos Grande in half using a Hakata technique called Kagami Baraki. I really apologize if I said that wrong. Although he claims he can only use his hollowfication for around 3 minutes, it's obvious his hollowfication is much stronger than most of the other Vizards, as Stark actually claims that Vizards of his level are so strong that his normal Ceros wouldn't even be enough to actually kill him while he is in Resurrection, and goes on to use his exploding wolves, which are actually much stronger, showing that Love impresses him when it comes to battle. I have Love so high on this list because he actually impresses the #1 Espada, and seems to be able to tussle with Stark in a one-on-one during certain moments of the battle. His Zanpakuto Tengumaru also gives him a massive amp of strength in Shikai, being able to smack Stark around and block some of his Ceros. It can also ignite itself in flames, which adds further damage to the swings connecting onto the opponent. Sadly, in the War Arc, like most of the other Vizards, he doesn't really do anything, and just like Lisa pre-time skip, he too is intimidated by a much weaker version of White, and the Databook Master explicitly says that he is serious in the fight. An underrated character who I wish more people talked about, and I frankly wish there was actually more to say about him, but we rarely see him appear in the series, other than his funny moments and lending porn from Lisa. Ushoda Hachigen, also known as Hachi, is coming in next on this list and is the former lieutenant of the Kido Corps under Tessai, and is coming in at a whopping 8'5". Talk about Chad Thundercock energy over here. Basically, I have Hachi on this list at number 3 because he is without a doubt one of the most hacked members of the Vizards. Having healing powers similar to that of Orihime's with time-space regression, he is also a Kido master who went on to develop his own Kido, and also has Kido barriers strong enough that it has Shinji's trust to keep their hideout secure, and also contain fully released hollows like White inside of when training for hollowfication. I have Hachi above most of the other Vizards purely because of how dangerous he is and how underappreciated his intellect actually is. Hachi as a Kido master should be able to use Kido that can stop time, teleport, create barriers with enough defense to block Ichigo's deformed hollow, which Lisa was scared she would actually die against alongside Love, considering he is at the point where he is stated to be making his own Kido, which seems to mean that he has basically learned every other Kido you could normally learn, forbidden or normal. He was able to come up with a plan to defeat one of the most hacked abilities in the entire series in a matter of moments, and could whip out Kidos fast enough to block the Respira ability. Alongside this, he seems to have the respect of Soifon, and she trusted him enough to work together and also use her Bonkai in accordance to his Kido to help defeat Baragon. Also, Hachi apparently has Kido great enough to be able to seal away Urahara for quite a long period of time, showing his Kido isn't a joke, and he could easily be a threat to all of the Vizards individually, alongside amplifying his Kido's potency with hollowfication. Or he could use Shikai and Bonkai, though we've never actually seen them, so I won't include them, but the boy Hachi is super underappreciated. When it comes to the topic of underrated, I don't think I've seen a character more underrated than the guy who looks like a chatty army commando that could honestly be mistaken for a character in Tekken. Ironically, when I was rereading his fights, I realized his Bonkai literally has the word Tekken in it. Kensei is more impressive to me than Love because Kensei actually goes toe-to-toe with Wonder Weiss purely in base, the character that was engineered to take down Yamato and seal his Zanpakuto, whereas Love and a lot of the other Vizards' greatest feats were in battles where they had help. What makes him so strong to me is that Mashido, the girl who can maintain hollowfication for 15 hours and was smacking the hell out of Wonder Weiss the entire time, well, after she got one-shot by Wonder Weiss's first punch, he attempts to launch a stronger one at her, which Kensei casually catches with one hand in a blitz while protecting Mashido at the same time. Kensei, in a rage, then goes into his Bankai and proceeds to beat the shit out of Wonder Weiss, pushing him to go into his Resurrection. Sadly though, this fight was off-screened, just like Yami versus Kenpachi and Byakuya. We have to sit through fights like this garbage here, but not Kensei throwing hands like an absolute badass. I'm really shocked that Mr. Kubo never drew that fight. It seems like it would have been a fight that he would enjoy making. Surprisingly, Kensei actually takes care of the household chores, he cooks, and he can use Kido quite well, which is sort of surprising for a character that just seems to love throwing hands, but I guess, you know, never judge a book by its cover. And it's actually stated that when he was fighting against Hollow Ichigo that he wasn't holding back at all in the fight. Something insane about Kensei that isn't actually shown until his fight with the Quincy Masty Masculine is that his Bankai is incredibly overpowered. Hurts, don't it? My Tachikaze is a Zanpakuto with an explosive swing. Tekken Tachikaze is a Bankai that packs the power of that explosion into the fist. The power of the explosion continues to be pounded in infinitely while the fist is in contact. Yeah, that's kind of strong. I think the reason people don't give Kensei more credit is actually because the two opponents he did fight didn't give him much opportunity to be shown off to the viewers, which was the same problem for Rose's battles too. Now, imagine you take Grimmjow and Ukiura, two characters that are pretty badass among the series. A lot of people love them. They're some of the most popular characters in the entire series to this day. Now, imagine that when they appear in the series, the only person that they fight, they only ever have one battle each. They both fight Aizen one-on-one, and he just goes and just knocks them out of existence. You would have the perception as a reader or watcher of Bleach that these characters are incredibly weak because they never did anything. Now, this is the same thing that happens with Kensei. It's all about perspective here as a reader or a watcher. A lot of people don't consider the fact that Kensei and Rose just happen to have really bad matchups, and this makes them synonymous with being jobbers, which just isn't true. They have some really hacks, overpowered abilities, and they are genuinely some of the strongest characters among the captains, right? But they just didn't get opportunities to show off their abilities correctly. Against Wonderwise, he's battling a foe that was meant for Yamamoto, the strongest captain, and against Masty Masculine, he's battling an opponent that can become infinitely stronger from the cheers of his sidekick James. And if he went into his Volständig, it would be even more one-sided. Though at the same time, I gotta say, him not going into hollowfication was really idiotic, and Rose claims that he actually fought the superstar the way that he did so that he could create an opening for him to slash James in half, when Kensei could have hollofied and stayed in the battle without taking that unnecessary damage. Like, imagine the infinite explosions that he can do with his fist, and then it being multiplied multiple times over with his mask on. Also, there is no reason that he can't hollofy, as Hiyori and the others could in the war. I believe the reason that he didn't hollofy is because now that he's a captain again, it might be a sentimental thing to not rely on that power, a weakness in his pride, if you will. Now, the reason I have Shinji Hirako at number 1 on this list is because he is, without a doubt, the most lethal of the Vizards. When he first spars with Ichigo, their spiritual pressure travels across the entire world and starts alerting hollows of their position, with Zenosuke Kurumadani thinking their power is the equivalent to monsters, which unironically isn't a shock, considering the stuff Ichigo had just done previously in the Soul Society arc. Not only was he able to tussle with Ichigo and then Grimmjow, who, granted, yes, he only had one arm at the time and was already fatigued from battle, he still at any moment of difficulty could have used his Shikai's hypnosis ability, which would be next to impossible for guys like Grimmjow and Ichigo to deal with, or most characters for that matter. Now, there are arguments you can make to really show that Grimmjow was actually much stronger than what was shown in this battle, though I will save them for a future Grimmjow video that I'm going to make. And it also doesn't change what I said about the hypnosis, it's really hacks. Now, this hypnosis actually messes with an opponent's sense of direction. It changes things from left to right, up to down, back to front. It even affects your eyes and its perception, along with where injuries are inflicted on your body. Let's say you get a slash on your left shoulder, it's going to appear on the right instead. And it also confuses you as to which direction attacks are coming from. It's essentially impossible to fight against. Unless you're Aizen. Shinji was not only already at the level of a captain when we first seen him, but was extremely versed at using hollowfication. He was one of the only characters to know that Aizen was up to no good in the past. Before Aizen revealed himself, he was able to cut Aizen while his sword was in effect, whereas Suifon was not. Though you can also argue this is just Kyokusoi Getsu tricking them, especially because Aizen ends up calling his Shikai the equivalent to a parlor trick. So even if this isn't Kyokusoi Getsu, you can just argue it was a surprise attack, which happened purely from Aizen's curiosity in that moment. Nothing more. Aizen does, however, claim that Shinji is special and that he will use his sword on him. So I guess it's a pretty good compliment. The only other person he unsheathes his sword for is actually Yamamoto during the same time period, as he respects Yamamoto enough to finish him off properly with some remnants of honor. Also, when Shinji goes to attack Aizen head-on, a much stronger Tosen than the one we've seen in the Soul Society attacks Shinji at the same time from a blind spot, and Shinji can react to the slash and avoid it, all within the same motion of him already swinging at Aizen, showing he is probably the fastest member of the Vizards. In the Bleach novel, Can't Fear Your Own World, we get to see Shinji's Bankai, Sakashima Yokoshima, Hapafu Sagari, which actually appears for the first time in the story. When this Bankai is activated, a Nadeshiko flower-shaped pedestal appears below Shinji's body, and this Bankai is explained by Shunsui to be a Bankai that, quote, does not distinguish between friend and foe. It affects everyone within the vicinity ability of its Reiatsu, disorientating the opponent's perception rather than their senses of sight and hearing. It causes the affected parties to believe that friends are foes and foes are friends. However, because of this ability, it's limited to fights where Shinji is outnumbered, as it would most likely affect those on his side. What's crazy is that he actually affected multiple Vasto Lorde Hollows with his Bonkai ability, which was summoned by Hikone. You can even argue these Vasto Lorde were amped and much stronger than the average Vasto Lorde that you'd run into in Hueco Mundo. Regardless though, with Shinji's incredibly hacks Shikai and Bonkai plus knowledge of Kido, which can be amplified by his mastered hollowfication, Shinji unironically is one of the most underrated characters when it comes to his intelligence, his speed, and general combat ability. It should be to no surprise that Shinji is number 1 in the Vizards. So that's basically it, guys. I hope you all enjoyed the video. I hope you all learned something once again. The thing that was annoying about this list is that not many people really talk about the Vizards, so I had to reread all of the fights, and also, to be completely honest, it's annoying to scale them during the Fate Karakura Town arc, because half the time it's hard to work out if they're actually under the influence of Kyoka Suigetsu at certain points against Aizen, and they sometimes look like massive jobbers during that arc, or their powers are ridiculously inconsistent and wacky depending on the opponents they're actually fighting, or statements made in the manga and official data books. But anyway, real quick before I finish off this video, please do me a favor and go check out my video on Soul Society Ichigo if you haven't already. It's one of the best videos I've made. It tackles everything to do with Ichigo around that part of the story. And if you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely enjoy that video and plenty of my other Bleach videos. Also, if you watch this far through the video, please subscribe to me and leave a like on the video. Thank you all for watching.